Let's open the book on this. What ancient site, once lost in the clouds, reveals the secrets of the Inca civilization? It's Machu Picchu. Hey, I'm Leah, and honestly, I'm so excited about today's topic: cloud forests, mysteries, and stonework that fits like a puzzle.
I'm Garrett, and yeah, I'm eager to dig into this one. Mountain citadels, ancient roads, and the whole lost and found vibe.
Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
Today's topic is Machu Picchu. Let's dive right in. Here's a cool thought to kick off. I'm into urban exploration, and I've always dreamed of walking those Inca terraces. I mean, seeing ashlar stonework up close, where blocks fit so tight you can't slide a knife between them. Pretty cool, right? Stepping through a trapezoidal doorway and catching the valley mist rising below has been on my bucket list for years.
Picture this. Machu Picchu is a 15th century Inca citadel, a fortified royal center set at about 2,430 meters in the Andes of southern Peru. It sits above the Sacred Valley, along the Urubamba River, with clouds rolling in like curtains. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, meaning the United Nations recognizes it as having outstanding universal value. And since 2007, it's also one of the new 7 wonders of the world. People call it the lost city of the Incas, even though locals always knew the mountains. Most scholars see it as a royal estate for Pachacuti, the Sapa Inca or emperor, with ritual, residential, and agricultural spaces woven together.
All right, let's set the stage further. The site splits into an agricultural sector of terraces called andes, engineered steps for farming on steep slopes, and an urban sector with 2 halves, Hanan, the upper town, and Hurin, the lower town. In Hanan, you've got the Sacred Plaza and the Intihuatana, a carved ritual stone tied to astronomical and ceremonial functions. In Hurin, you find residential compounds, workshops, and a big single-entrance building, often compared to an aklahuasi, basically a residence or institution for akla, selected women who worked in ritual and high-status production. Add in the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the 3 Windows, the main temple, and the Temple of the Condor, and you've got a dense ceremonial landscape built with elite Inca precision.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The location is a narrow saddle between 2 peaks, Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu, with cliffs dropping some 450 meters to the Urubamba on 3 sides. That's natural defense and drama. Radiocarbon studies, specifically AMS radiocarbon dating, a precise technique for measuring the age of organic material, place its main occupation around 1420 to 1530. That lines up with the reigns of Pachacuti and his successor, Tupac Inca Yupanqui. And then abandonment in the mid-1500s, likely as disease and the Spanish conquest fractured the empire.
Why pick a place that hard to build on, though? I mean, cliffs, earthquakes, all of it.
2 big reasons. First, sacred geography. In Andean belief, a huaca is a sacred place or feature, and this ridge encircled by the river fits that spiritual map. Second, geology. Researchers argue the site sits over earthquake faults that naturally fractured the granite, which means masons had pre-broken stone and seams to key their walls into, improving seismic stability. It's sacred and practical at once.
Let's bounce over to the build quality. Classic Inca dry stone masonry, no mortar, but blocks shaped so precisely they interlock. The walls tilt slightly inward and doorways are trapezoidal, and both moves help with earthquakes. The terraces step the mountain in wide bands, acting like streets and platforms. And get this, the terrace cores were layered, big stones at the bottom, then loose gravel, then sandier mixes, then imported topsoil from the valley. That's serious engineering.
Why import soil up a mountain, though? That sounds exhausting.
Drainage and fertility. The cloud forest climate here is humid and rainy, around 1,800 to 2,010 millimeters of rain a year, so water management mattered more than irrigation. Those porous layers let excess water pass through instead of pooling and turning slopes into slides, and richer topsoil from down in the valley gave crops like maize a boost. The goal was to shed water fast while keeping plants happy.
Let's dig deeper into who lived there. Archaeology and bioarchaeology, studies of human remains, show a diverse resident community. Many were Yanaconas, permanent retainers serving the estate, and some were former Akla, Chemical signatures and ancient DNA point to origins across the Andes, the coast, parts of Ecuador, even the Amazon. They lived and were buried together, which speaks to imperial integration. Health markers are telling too. Fewer signs of heavy labor, like arthritis or high fracture rates, compared to military or quarry populations, which suggests service roles, craft production, ritual support, and administration were the norm.
And the ritual side cuts against some expectations. There's little direct evidence for human sacrifice here, unlike Capacocha, the empire-wide high-status sacrifice sometimes done at other sacred peaks. Instead, you see animal offerings, especially camelids like llamas and alpacas. The Temple of the Condor blends carved bedrock with caves. Finds there and nearby include faunal remains linked to ceremonies and burials. There are over 100 caves and rock shelters used as tombs. Remains of around 170-plus individuals have been recorded. Also, 6 dogs were buried among people, which lines up with Andean beliefs about animal guardians in death. That kind of blew my mind.
Real talk. Food-wise, the terraces total only about 4.9 hectares, not enough to feed everyone, especially during ceremonies. Isotope studies suggest a maize-heavy short-term diet at the site, which matches corn's ceremonial role in Inca life. So provisioning came in via roads and bridges. Intipunku, the Sun Gate, served as a dramatic entry aligned with sunrise views, while the Inca bridge route across a cliff face controlled a back way. The point is, it wasn't isolated. Access was curated.
Speaking of which, the modern story is a ride. Agustin Lizarraga, a Peruvian explorer, reached the ruins in 1902 and left a charcoal inscription. In 1911, Hiram Bingham, a Yale lecturer turned expedition leader, arrived guided by Melchor Arteaga, a local farmer. Quechua farmers Richarte and Alvarez, who had been clearing terraces, and Richarte's son Pablito helped lead him in. Bingham publicized the site internationally and kickstarted scientific mapping and excavation. He initially credited Lizarraga in notes, then later, in his 1952 book Lost City of the Incas, leaned into the lone discoverer angle. That's a curveball in how stories get told.
Let's not let this one slide by. Bingham removed thousands of artifacts in 1912 to 1915 under what was supposed to be an 18-month loan to Yale. Among the finds were 15th-century ceremonial knives made of bismuth bronze, the earliest known artifacts with that alloy in the Andes. Over decades, Peru sought their return. In 2012, the final batch came back and now sits at the Machu Picchu Museum, Casa Concha in Cusco, a space run locally, so people can study and see the objects where they belong.
Management today is a balancing act. Peru declared a big historic sanctuary around the site in 1981, UNESCO inscribed it in 1983, and there's a no-fly zone to reduce noise and wildlife disturbance. Visitor caps started at around 2,500 per day in 2011 and have evolved with staggered entry routes. In 2024, the cap increased to 4,500 daily, with up to 5,600 in peak season. Flooding in 2010 forced a temporary closure, and the pandemic in 2020 shut it down for months. There was even one special opening for a stranded Japanese visitor. It shows how fragile access can be and why routing and limits matter.
Okay, let's move on to a question that's close to the heart of it. What's the site's original name? A 2021 study in a journal focused on Andean archaeology argued it might actually have been called Huayna Picchu, or simply Picchu. Those are local toponyms, place names, on early maps and in field notes. The now famous label, Machu Picchu, may have spread through Bingham's early 1900s writings. If that's true, centering indigenous names matters. Names carry memory and identity, real talk that resonates with me.
I hear that, and I'll nudge the other angle. The name Machu Picchu has, for better or worse, become the global signpost. Bingham's publications, and later the New Seven Wonders nod, cemented that label worldwide. So the question becomes how you honor original toponyms without losing the ability to communicate clearly with millions who only know one name. Maybe dual naming works, acknowledging Huayna Picchu or Picchu in signage and scholarship while navigating the reality of global recognition. That's worth exploring.
Why does the name debate affect conservation, though?
Because names shape stories, and stories guide policy. If the narrative centers local knowledge, Management might lean more into community stewardship and buffer zone protections around the town of Aguascalientes. If it centers a global brand alone, the pull might be toward throughput and spectacle. The sweet spot is giving authority to local names and voices while communicating the site's values to a global audience.
Switching gears, just a little. Pop culture made a huge difference when Machu Picchu was named one of the new 7 wonders in 2007. That label supercharged tourism and etched it into the worldwide imagination, right up there with places like Petra in Jordan. Visibility brings funding and awareness, but it also brings foot traffic, which is why those timed circuits and caps are absolutely key.
Here's a thought I've been turning over. What if that 1990s plan for a cable car and luxury complex had gone ahead? On one hand, you get easier access and broader inclusion. People who can't hike could still experience the site. With innovative management, like boardwalks to spread wear, strict capacity, electric shuttles, and real-time monitoring, you might thread the needle. Alpine parks do similar things, so it's not impossible.
And here's where I'm cautious. A cable car and big hotel footprint could mean more erosion on steep, rain-soaked slopes, more waste to manage in a tight valley, and visual intrusion on a sacred skyline. Noise and vibration, think helicopter rotor wash back in the day, already raised red flags, which is why there's a no-fly stance. I can imagine the character of the sanctuary shifting from contemplative to crowded, and that's a no-go for me if it erodes what makes the place powerful.
Totally get where you're coming from. My best-case scenario would have been strict zoning, keep heavy development well outside the sanctuary, build resilient access that blends into the landscape, and set hard digital caps tied to trail and platform sensors. If that level of control wasn't realistic in the 1990s, then yeah, better to have paused and learned. The current approach, circuit routes, timed slots, and limits, feels like the right kind of restraint. All right, that ties it up nicely. Thanks for hanging with us on this climb through stone and cloud, and stay curious. Keep exploring the story behind Machu Picchu.
And that's where we'll leave it for now. Here's to names that matter, roads that connect, and terraces that still teach us how to live on a mountain.